What's going on, guys? This is Jake and Brian at thatfitfriend.com, and today we will be reviewing the Adidas Adizero EVO SL. This is what I would say is one of the most hot running shoes right now. Everybody seems to love this shoe.
It's everywhere, man.
It's been sold out of almost all the running shoes.
Can't find it. I had to go to 4 stores to get this pair.
So let's talk about why that could be. So a few pros that we have with the shoe is, for me, number one, the Light Strike Pro foam midsole. It has so much pop. The moment you put the shoe on, honestly, I felt through the forefoot that I just had a lot more spring to my step, and for being a $150 shoe, that kind of caught me off guard, because generally speaking, with this type of responsiveness, I feel like you're usually paying more for a premium shoe, or you're paying for a shoe from Adidas that has the carbon rods in it, or a carbon plate from things like Puma, Nike, etc. So I feel like for the price point, the responsiveness of this midsole is awesome. And Brian, I'm curious for your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think the Light Strike Pro is the flagship foam that Adidas is using in their top-of-the-line racing day models. So you know that this is going to be the best of the best in terms of energy return that Adidas has to offer. And for a price point of under $160, you can't really beat it. I think it makes the shoe light, it makes the shoe snappy, it makes the shoe just fun to wear. I put it on and just walking around, I loved the spring and the cushion. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it kind of made me feel similar to my Adizero Boston 12s that I loved, in the sense of, just the spring of them. But this doesn't have the carbon rods, which I actually kind of like too, because it gives the midfoot a little bit more flex. But the second pro that I have with this shoe is just how lightweight it is. This size 10 US shoe weighs about 8.8 ounces, and this has a decent stack height. So to be able to save that much on weight and give you still a pretty thick stack height shoe, nice comfy ride with a lot of responsiveness, I personally love that. And I think that really bleeds into all of the features of this shoe, which we'll talk about later in this video. But everything that Adidas pretty much put into this shoe, it seems like was to save on weight specifically and keep this shoe very lightweight, very springy. Brian, what is another pro that you have with this model?
I think for a shoe that has a 6mm drop, Jake, this is still going to be great for all sorts of running forms and style. I'm someone who is more of a mid to forefoot striker, and this shoe is fantastic for that. I think usually a 6mm or less drop tends to be. But even for folks who tend to be more of heel foot strikers, take a look at the heel, just the stack height of the shoe. There's a solid amount of cushion in there, and that's going to be great for when you're getting fatigued and start to get a little bit sloppy with your form, or if you're just somebody who is more of a heel foot striker. It's great.
And he said that because I am the person who gets fatigued and gets sloppy with his form, because he's also helping me with some of my running program right now. And yeah, to hit your point, Brian, I do feel like this is kind of like that fail-safe shoe for a lot of different running styles. I do adapt to heel strike when I get more tired and I get fatigued. I slow down my stride rate. And this model was a bit more forgiving. Is it going to be the most forgiving in the game? Maybe not, because we don't have the most aggressive heel bevel. We don't have the thickest heel. But for a decent price point, if you want a lot of pop, this shoe, again, works really well for a lot of different running styles. But now let's talk about a couple of cons that we did find with this shoe. So the majority of cons that we found with this shoe are really kind of circumstantial and preferential. So for the most part, this shoe has been solid, but there are a couple little quirks that I just don't necessarily love for all types of contexts. And so for me personally, my first gripe with this shoe, and I know this is done to save on weight, and I know it's not the end of the world, but the tongue. The tongue can be a little bit annoying. This thin mesh tongue, it doesn't have a gusset. So what I notice is that it can get pulled down at times or slide if you don't get the security right when you're first putting them on. So my piece of advice for everybody is, when you're putting the shoe on, unlace it, lay this tongue nice and even and flat on your foot, and then try to lace up from the bottom up. That will give you a better security and keep that tongue a little bit more in its location. Again, not the end of the world, but it is something that I noticed, and I feel like a light gusset would have gone a long way with the shoe, even if it was just one of those thinner little materials that help just kind of keep this tongue a little bit more in place without adding too much weight to the shoe. I think that would have done wonders for the tongue functionality of this model. Another potential con that I could see folks having is, look, if you're somebody that needs a shoe with an outsole that's going to be a little bit more variable regarding the traction that you're going to get and the surfaces that you are running on, this might also not be the best option. Personally, we love the Continental rubber outsole and how lightweight it is and how it feels on tracks, concrete, assault runners, and treadmills. But if you are somebody who lives in a damper climate, or if you're somebody who wants a shoe that can transcend out of the gym or of dry concrete, onto some packed gravel and whatnot, that might be a little bit more slippery and damp or a little bit looser, this model may start to fall short. You just don't get as much traction with this outsole. So again, you're saving on weight and getting a gain there, but you are losing out a little bit on the versatility of the shoe. Not necessarily a knock on this model. It's just like a good to know kind of thing. And it's not necessarily a con against the shoe's overall functionality, but if you do need something with a bit more range regarding the surfaces it can tackle, that would definitely be a potential con, in my opinion, for some runners and individuals. And then I think we have one more con. Again, this is another con that I think we both kind of noted that isn't an end-all be-all, but for some foot anatomies, it could be an issue. And Brian, what is it?
I would say that the engineered mesh upper that Adidas made here definitely has gone to save weight. It is super light, it's super breathable. I think Jake noted earlier that you can basically see through it in certain sections. But if you're someone who's looking for a little bit more stability, a little bit more structure, a little bit more lock in that upper section of your shoe, this probably isn't the right choice for you. It's pretty flimsy. If you tend to pronate, you're going to feel that you're spilling over into the medial section of the shoe a little bit. There's just not a lot holding you in there. It's definitely not a stability or support shoe.
All right, to break down the performance of the shoe, we'll discuss how this model does for short runs. So think interval runs or anything from 1 to 3-ish miles, mid-range runs, so 4 to 6, and then longer runs, 7+. We'll also discuss how this shoe does for just daily wear comfort and walking. So when it comes to short runs, I feel like for me personally, that's where this shoe excelled. We took this through a couple of workouts. We were vomiting some 400 to 800 to 1,000 meter intervals at pretty fast paces, and this shoe just came to play. We did that on the Assault Runner. We also did some outside on the track, and this model felt great. It felt very poppy, and if you are somebody, again, who's running at a quicker pace at shorter interval bouts, and you are a very forefoot dominant striker or midfoot striker, I think you're going to love the way this Light Strike Pro feels on the foot. And with just how lightweight it is, it makes it a very easy shoe for that type of speed training. Brian, what were your thoughts there?
Yeah, the first run I did in this shoe was my typical Tuesday track session, and I absolutely loved everything about it. The energy return that the Light Strike Pro provides made these things feel snappy, responsive. I really felt like I was flying around the track, and frankly, they're just so light. There's nothing on your foot here. This is just something that I want when I'm doing some quick work.
He literally texted me that morning and was like, dude, I can't wait for you to try this shoe. It is sick for speed stuff. So he literally texted me that. But mid-range runs, 4 to 6 miles, overall pretty dang good. Again, like this is a shoe that really reminds me of my Boston 12s that I just absolutely loved. And those had the carbon rods throughout the midfoot. This model does not. And I honestly feel like I might prefer this shoe more. Yeah. And I think it's just because it does have a little bit more play throughout. Like you have good structure here through the midfoot regarding how much flex you get. So you do have a bit more of a springy ride, but it does have a little bit more give, which I think gives you a bit more forgiveness for, different tempos in that running range. Brian, what were your thoughts on like the 4 to 6 mile range in this shoe?
Well, so Jake, my only other real experience with the Light Strike Pro and Adidas is from the Adios Pro, their top of the line racing model, which has those carbon rods and keeps the shoe a bit more rigid. And so when I was taking this out for just some easy recovery runs, anything 3 to 6 miles, for me, again, that's like a 7:30 to 8:15 pace. I was a little hesitant going into it because I don't like the rigidity of the Adios Pro and those carbon rods combined with the Light Strike. Without the carbon rods, this thing felt fabulous on some of those easy runs. I was able to just kind of plod along at my mellow pace. And because these are so forgiving and so responsive, but also not that rigid, I felt comfortable going at a slower pace as opposed to those carbon rods making me want to really pick up the pace.
That's a great point. And that speaks to kind of why this model I think could be also good for longer distance runs is, yeah, you can just do a lot of different running styles and paces in the shoe and feel pretty comfortable. You don't feel like you have to adapt a certain stride to maintain comfort. You don't feel like you have to maintain a certain pace. And I feel like for a $150 running shoe, running at longer distances, this again can be a really good option. And I think when you look around right now at the landscape of running shoes at that $150 price point, a lot of them tend to be a little bit on the softer side. A lot of them tend to, I would say, feel a little bit heavier or maybe almost like call it sluggish at times. This is a nice, I would say, counterbalance to that with that price point. It feels very poppy no matter what pace you're running at. And I'm curious if you feel similar there because I almost feel like this is why the shoe has done so well regarding other people liking it. Yeah. Because it is kind of like that going against the grain of that feel for that slower pace run. It feels really responsive despite going at a slower rate.
Yeah, I mean, the word that keeps coming to mind for me is the unicorn. The shoe, you can wear it on the track for your short runs, your interval work. You can wear it on your easy days, and you can take it out for your long runs. and even throw some pickups in there if you want. It's just one of these shoes that you can do pretty much everything in. I mean, I would even race in this shoe if I were in a pinch and didn't have something that was carbon plated at hand. If you're traveling and need your one shoe, this could be it.
And also, we are not getting paid by Adidas. We just really like.
No, I'm
shoe.
just a fanboy right now.
It sounds like we're like trying to overhype this, but honestly, it's just a good model. And now I want to talk about daily wear comfort and walking, because I could see that being an issue with this shoe, and that's for two reasons. So number one, this model, you have to size up, in my opinion, a half size.
Yeah.
I'm a size 10. He's a size 10. We both decided to size up a half size because they ran a little bit short. And so what that ends up doing is it just makes the fit a little bit awkward regarding the length. So when it comes to all day wear and whatnot, I could see that being problematic. And I could also see potentially just the upper not giving you enough wiggle room. But another issue that I could see folks having with the shoe for daily wear is, look, the insole is not removable. That's great for saving weight. That's great for giving this a nice cohesive fit. But if you are somebody, and we mentioned this in our cons, that needs a little bit more medial midfoot support for your just daily wear, if you're walking the dogs and running errands and whatnot, or if you have a custom orthotic that you want to put into this shoe, this would not be a good option to go with, because when you take out this insole, it is held in with a light adhesive. You always run that risk of not having your orthotic sit nice and flush and perfect, or if you're trying to get this insole back in, having it stay secure and get nice and flush again. So that would definitely be a context where I could see, if you want this shoe for also just walking out and about, and you want a bit more stack height and cushion and comfort and whatnot, this would also fall short. And then speaking, before I give the floor to you, just talking back on the outsole tread. So I'm thinking like my nurses out there who like to wear running shoes for their shifts and they want something comfortable and whatnot. I would say probably steer clear of this shoe and whatnot, because if you're working indoors, this smooth insole I see could be problematic, especially for damper surfaces. My mind goes to like tile, for example, that might be damp. I know this is a very, very rare niche and they're not built for that, but a lot of people ask about that and people will use that in the real world for it. So I want to speak to it. That could be problematic with this model's outsole, but for daily wear and comfort and walking, Brian, what were your thoughts so far on the shoe?
Jake, you took most of the words right out of my mouth. I think the number one thing that came to mind for me was just how flimsy and flexible this upper is. I just didn't feel super locked down or supported when I was just walking around. And also, I think the Light Strike Pro, again, this is Adidas's prime, top of the line, energy return foam. It makes you want to go fast. It doesn't necessarily lend itself to walking around the city or running errands. And I think combined with that kind of flimsy upper, this to me just feels like a running shoe as opposed to a daily wear shoe.
That's fair. Go grocery shopping in these and you'll be the fastest you've ever been. All right, so now let's answer the question, who should buy the Adizero EVO SL? So number one for me, anybody who might be a little bit more on a budget, and mind you, like I know $150 is still a lot, but it is cheaper than other models out there. I think this is a good option to go with. It's a fail-safe model for that price point. Brian, who else should buy this shoe?
I think that's a really good call out that I just want to double down on, Jake. The running shoe landscape can be a little overwhelming right now with your super trainers, your race day shoes, your daily drivers. And if you're somebody who's just getting into running or wants to get into running for racing and doesn't want to break the bank, this is a great one shoe to do it all option. It's a great first shoe in terms of like, let me try something that I can do my pickups in, my race day stuff in, and my easy runs in.
And then number three, if you prioritize saving weight with your running shoes, this can be a great option to go with. The overall build of this shoe just really feeds into saving weight and going fast. So if that's something you're after, you do a lot of interval runs, you do a lot of speed work, you do a lot of track workouts, I think you're gonna love this shoe. Now, who should potentially pass on this shoe?
I think if you are more of a heel foot striker, you're probably going to want to reconsider making this your next purchase. 6mm heel drop. This is definitely geared towards more of your mid to forefoot strikers and folks who are just a little bit faster on their feet.
Yeah, and like you can heel strike in this shoe, but to your point, it's just not going to be that best if that's all you do with your running stride and that's how you like to run, especially for longer ranges. Another context where I can see this shoe falling short is, look, if you need more structure and more medial midfoot support with your running shoes, this model can also fall short. You're not going to get a lot of support with this upper, and that is going to be something that I can see being problematic for some other folks. And then the third context where I think you should probably pass on this shoe is my custom orthotic folks. Yeah. I don't know if you're going to necessarily love this shoe. I think it can work if your orthotic is thinner, but if you have a thicker orthotic, the upper volume could be problematic. And then also, again, without that removable insole, you always do run that risk with that adhesive, not allowing that orthotic to sit nice and flush and comfortable with how you probably prefer and like. All right, so when it comes to the sizing and fit of the Adidas Adizero EVO SL, I have an E to double E width foot and a normal instep and arch, and I found this model to run a little bit short regarding its length, so we sized up a half size. Now, if you have a narrower foot, you might be able to, I think, get away going true to size, but if you have a medium or a slightly wider foot and you live and die by having that thumb's width length at the end of your toe box, you will likely want to size up. Even going up a half size, like measuring this, I had just under a thumb's width. So even sizing up a half size, I was still kind of pushing that perfect balance that I like to strike with my running shoes typically. Brian, what did you think of the sizing and fit of the shoe?
Same deal. I also had to size up. I will say the toe box felt roomy enough when I went to that 10.5. It did not strike me as a narrow shoe, even though it's not billed as a wider shoe. And again, I have a D to E width foot, so slightly more narrow than Jake, but also tend to prefer a wider toe box.
So all that said, narrower feet, you're probably safe going true to size, but if you wear Adidas now, you might want to go up a half size compared to what you typically wear with the brand.
That's another good call out. My pair of Adidas Adizero Adios Pro, their racing shoe with light strike and carbon rods, I wear a size 10, and this is a 10.5. Much more comfortable in the 10.5 to this one.
All right, so when looking at the weight, heel toe drop, and insole in the Adizero EVO SL for a size 10 US shoe, you have a weight of 8.8 ounces. That makes this shoe incredibly lightweight for that size. The heel to toe drop of this shoe sits at 6 millimeters, and this model doesn't have a removable insole. This insole is held in with a light adhesive, so if you do remove it, be very conscious that it could be a pain to get back in or put your own orthotic in. So definitely some food for thought for folks who do use their own custom insoles or orthotics in their running shoes. All right, so when looking at the construction of the Adizero EVO SL, up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole that lips here on the medial side of the shoe. Pretty cool for toeing off when you are running. Looking at the midsole of this shoe, you have the Light Strike Pro midsole that runs throughout. Again, this is a super lightweight and responsive insole. Awesome if you do like a little bit more pop with your running shoes. Looking at the outsole, you have the smooth continental rubber that runs throughout the forefoot into the heel here. You have some exposed foam here through the midfoot and the heel, but this outsole is very smooth. So if you're running on dry surfaces, that shouldn't be an issue, but this would definitely not be a great option for any form of loose terrain or wet surfaces. You might want to be a little bit more careful on that with this shoe. Looking at the upper, you have a mesh upper that runs throughout the forefoot into the midfoot. It is super lightweight and breathable. That is one of the perks of this shoe. You can basically see my fingers through the ventilated patterns up here in the forefoot. And then you do have a bit more padding back here to the boot and an internal heel cup to help give you lockdown. Looking at the midfoot of this shoe, you have 4, 5, 6 core eyelets that go up with a 7th back here for lace lock. And then the tongue itself doesn't have a gusset, and it's this lightweight mesh with a loop here. That can be hit or miss as mentioned in the cons, but it does help save on some weight of the shoe. And then once again, this model doesn't have a removable insole, but if you have additional questions on the construction of the shoe, drop a comment down below. All right, guys, that wraps up this review of the Adidas Adizero EVO SL. Honestly, I get the hype. I understand why people are loving on this shoe.
Yeah.
Big thanks to Brian here. If you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below. And again, if you have running related questions on if this shoe will work well for your running style, your stride, and your overall gait, drop a comment down below. Brian is an endurance coach. He works with a lot of different runners at all different levels of the game. So leave a comment. Brian can also help you out. But as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, drop subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys in the next one.